We'll call the meeting to order, please. We have three items on our open agenda this morning, so I'll just call for a motion to approve that agenda, please.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Contrary minded? Thank you. And the first item then is our Enterprise St. John presentation for the 2019-2021 plan. And I believe, Ron, you're going to present that?
Yeah.
Sure, welcome, Mr. Ron Gannett.
Good morning. And we're there.
Excellent.
Well, good morning, Your Worship and Council and committee members. Really appreciate the invitation to be here and to present the overview of the Economic Development Plan. Call it hits of our.
Oh, sorry. Once in a while when I play golf, I like to have mulligans. I like to start over. I would like a quick do-over, if you wouldn't mind. So if I could just, start over. Can I just start over real quick?
I'm throwing it back to his worship.
Yeah, thank you. Look, sorry, brain is running today, so I want to start over. So welcome everybody this morning. Before we turn it over to Mr. Ron Gannett from Enterprise St. John, just want to provide a little bit of context. So really pleased to have Enterprise St. John here today with us to present, to talk about their plan, so their new plan, some of the ideas, how did we arrive here, and certainly Ron will take us through the context from I'm here of multiple hats. I'm here today as the chair of the growth committee, but just to provide some context that we had through ROC, which is the oversight committee for Enterprise St. John. Ron had come to us a number of months ago now and said, look, I'm early, my feet are getting underneath me, I'm pleased to be here in town, but I think there's going to be some things that we may need to change. And we're in a moving and evolving marketplace. I note, just for example, this morning that you may have seen that Toronto was not successful in getting the Amazon HQ2, I think they're calling it. And they went to, interestingly, New York and North Virginia, or somewhere in Virginia. And the article, though, said, oh, thank goodness we didn't get it, because those 50,000 jobs would have drained out the city. And that's a city that's, help me, David, probably getting a couple 100,000 people a year to it at least. So I think we're likely going to hear today a little bit about talent and about this evolving and changing marketplace that we're in. And so with that context, Ron many months ago said, look, I'm going to get my feet underneath me. I think he's solidly doing that. And he's going to take a look at his organization, and he's going to say, I think this is what we do well, and this is maybe what we could do differently or do better. And even more importantly, I hope Ron stop doing, because that's something that the City of St. John needs to do as well. And so we're excited to hear the presentation today. And this is my comment that it isn't black and white. And boy, I wish it was. I wish this work that we did was black and white. It's not black and white, and so we're going to hear a presentation today from the CEO of Enterprise, and he'll introduce his team with him here in terms of where we are, and more importantly, where he thinks we should go. I think that's the more appropriate introduction than. Over to you, Ron. So I sincerely apologize for my failed first attempt. There you go. Over to you.
So thank you so much, Mayor Darling, and I appreciate the do-over, if for no other reason than just to collect my thoughts for a moment. So I do want to say that the chair of the board, Andrew Olin, very much wanted to be here. As a matter of fact, he said, "Do you think they could change their date?" And then I looked at your agenda and I said, "I don't think that's a fair request." But he very much wanted to be here. He's out of town. Representing the executive is Paulette Hicks, who is very well known to the region, and a really great addition to our board and to our executive. Also with me is Sue Crozier and Eleanor McLean from our staff. So delighted to be here. As the mayor alluded to, I arrived a year ago back to St. John. Started my career here. Have had a long career. I won't get into the number of years, but in economic development as the president and CEO in Greater Moncton for a 10-year period, and off to Ontario for close to a decade. And coming back, came back a year ago. It was an interesting perspective to come back to a region that was near and dear to us, and then to sort of take that introspective look. So the first couple of months, November, December, I did what was very difficult for me. I'm not quite sure where I'm supposed to look, but I'll try to do the panoramic. I did something that was a bit of a challenge for me, and I literally listened for 2 months. And I met with a lot of you, I met with staff, I met with stakeholders, met with board members, and really wanted to get a sense of where exactly is St. John and how did we get here? Because it's one thing to come in and talk about change and things we have to do, but if you don't understand that history and where we are, you can get yourself and your organization and the city in a lot of trouble if you just start going off. So that was the first 2 months. Then in the winter, I went home to, at the time, Stratford for Christmas vacation, came back with the intention of really getting to work and leaning into what needed to happen. So in the winter of 2018, we began by doing research, looking at really what was happening to population, to jobs, to our industries, to the changing of our industry, to our population, our demographic changes. And then Andrew and I and some executive members conducted a number of interviews with top employers in the region. And really, that was not, that was not to hear accolades or criticism of the ESJ. That was a very pointed question. What keeps you awake at night? What's your biggest concern? What's your burning issue? And we needed to hear that from our employers, and I'll come back to that later. We also did consultation with industry and partners and other levels of government. And we listened and we learned. So that was in the winter months. And then for the next 4 months, we developed a 3-year economic development plan. Thanks so much. What I would like council, we would like council and this committee to understand is that the underpinning of that economic development plan was those things that we learned. It was what is keeping industry awake at night. It was also, the underpinning was based on the City of St. John's roadmap for smart growth. It was based on its population growth agenda, and it was based on the what I call, I'm not sure the exact title, but the positioning white paper that was presented to the province pre and during the election campaign. The further premise of this plan is based on the city's desire of 4 themes: alignment, collaboration, a return on your investment, and a clear focus. So the following presentation highlights the economic development plan, and I'll actually get into it now. So before Ron arrived on scene, there was a lot of good work done in terms of how do we measure results? What is your return on investment? So we call these KPIs, or key performance indicators. And for 2018, we put some targets up there. What I can report on today are the Q3 quarters. So that brings us to the end of September. And for the numbers that we agreed to look at, I think we're trending well. I say we, the collective we, but these are sort of ESJ's performance indicators. Our target was to work with 800 young people, potential entrepreneurs, future entrepreneurs. At the end of September, that was in just over 1,500. In terms of startups, we're rate, as at the end of September at 24. We'll end up the year over 30 or close to 30. Existing entrepreneurs, we've targeted 45 jobs as of the end of September, with another quarter to go, 48 jobs. Existing businesses, the projection was 550, and that was based on sort of best guess in what had happened in other years. At the end of September, 884 jobs were announced, and that'll be up by the end of the year. External investors, the projection was 250 jobs. Announced to date, 450. And some of those you would know is TD Bank, S&P Data, and the like, Bicom. Thanks, Bill. So, that's great. I'm glad that we're hitting those KPIs. But as a board, as a staff, we really felt that we needed a new plan, a focus for the next 3 years. And what does that plan need? It needs strong regional economic leadership. Certainly, when I say regional, when I say regional, I'm talking about the population base of 127.5, which is Greater St. John. But clearly, as the city goes, the region goes. We need clear focus areas based on current realities and opportunities. So, I've done economic development across this country, and everybody wants, everybody wants that silver bullet. Everybody wants new jobs. They want people moving into the area. We needed to base this on our current realities and our inherent opportunities. Properly funded economic development, we'll come back to that. Certainly, alignment of economic development efforts, working with other levels of government, working with the city, with Develop, Discover, and the many partners we work with, the port, the airport. Finally, we need to change hearts and minds. We need to do that work internally as much as externally. The mayor does it on a daily basis, telling people what it's like to live and work in St. John. He's passionate about it. We need another 100,000 people equally passionate about that. So, very quickly, the next slide. The goal of the economic development plan, we've tried to keep them really specific. Increase in employment for the region, increase in the labor force, increase in the gross domestic product, and increase over time in consumer confidence. How are people feeling about living and working in the region? So how do we do that? Those are sort of the broad metrics, the macroeconomic metrics that we're going to try to keep a handle on. But what's going to drive that? It's really 4 focus areas. So our economic development plan speaks to 4 specific pillars, and this will be the total sum and intentionality of the organization going forward. We're going to prioritize workforce development, and we'll talk to these in some level of detail. Business investment and innovation, entrepreneur development, and marketing the Greater St. John story. And when I say that this plan is not ESJ's plan. It's the city's plan, it's the regional plan, it's our stakeholders and partners plan equally. So in terms of workforce development, specifically within 3 years, we want to build an integrated community model that ensures that the Greater St. John companies can attract and retain talent. Remember, I told you that Andrew and I were out talking to industry, and we said, what keeps you awake at night? 2 things. Firstly, that they can't, in many cases, get the talent they need to expand or to fill the existing jobs. Secondly, it's harder to attract people when there's a perception that's not stellar about the region, about the city. People know now that this is the only CMA in Canada to lose population in the last census area. We need to work diligently to not only turn that reality around, but to turn the perception around that's associated with it. So that's year 3. Year 1, we're going to work with 30 companies to fill 80% of the unfilled jobs in the region. So focus on stagnant jobs posted for 90 days. And you might ask, why would you do that? Why would you be focused on bringing new jobs into the region? We are, but I can tell you, if you ask a real estate developer why they're holding off on putting up new buildings, they will likely tell you because we have excess building available in the region, that we have vacant space that we need to fill before we can build new. And the same is true with the labor force. If we don't fill the existing gaps in the labor force, it's going to be virtually impossible to ask companies to come in and invest in new employment. So we need to do them in tandem. Our priority with this, working with the city, the province, O&B, PEDAL, is to in the next 6 months fill 360 of those vacant jobs. And we're going to do that in a very concerted and focused way, as I say, with our partners. This is to address specifically the city issue of a jobs gap, which is directly related to how do we increase our population. So the city, we're working with them now to find a war room and where we can really focus on this. Business investment and innovation, our second pillar. By the end of year 3, a total of 900 jobs created through investment attraction. That's bringing new investment into the region. So that roughly breaks down to 300 a year. And in year 1, 300 jobs created through bringing new investment to build on our inherent strength. The goal, sorry.
Go back, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. So the next one. Yeah. There's another component of bringing investment into the region, and that's around innovation. How do one thing that we have heard and our research indicates is when it comes to research and development, this region lags behind Fredericton dramatically. It lags behind certainly other parts of Atlantic Canada. So we want a concerted effort on encouraging innovation. And to that end, we want to explore the possibility of developing an innovation district in Uptown St. John that would drive industry, government, and research facilities into a collaborative space. And we think that would be a huge emphasis to increase growth in Uptown from a population scenario to a business startup scenario to a business and government collaboration space. So year 1, we want to develop that concept, the feasibility of it. We want to secure partner buy-in at the other level of government level and industry level. And finally, sorry, 2 more. On entrepreneur development, year 3 goal is 90 new businesses, resulting in 180 new jobs. Year 1 specifically, 30 new businesses, resulting in 60 jobs. And finally, why do we need to be marketing the region? For me, and I think the board will be tired of hearing this, but when I arrived in St. John a year ago, and I looked at the budget of the organization, and I was looking for a marketing budget, and it wasn't there. We had $60,000 dedicated towards communications. That was a real interesting scenario for me, to see that the organization charged with economic development did not have a marketing budget. And further, I then had to look and say, well, who does have the mandate to market the region beyond from a tourism perspective? And it just simply hasn't been happening. So we know that's a priority of the city. We know it's a priority of Develop St. John, and we can unequivocally say it's a priority of Enterprise St. John. And we want to do that. And we want to build on, you know, St. Austin and the good work that Discover has been doing. But we want to do it from the standpoint of inviting people to come and live here and work here and invest here. And we think that that is a message that is beyond Enterprise St. John, that it needs to be collaborative, that it needs to be leveraged. So the year one target for this is to collaborate with agencies, municipalities, to create a shared marketing toolbox where we would all have a common, you know, we're not all going to have the same message to the same group, but we'll have a consistent theme in our messaging. So we also in year one want to complete an economic development marketing plan and acquire the resources to implement the plan. And this is going to take, you know, the city is going to take other levels of government. It's also going to take the private sector coming on side to support this. Sector opportunities. We will be working with a number of sectors. The priority sectors over the next 3 years will be energy. That probably seems like an obvious in this room, but when you look at the resources we have, the industry capability, you look at companies like St. John Energy, it makes sense to focus on that sector. Digital health, cybersecurity, and cybersecurity is not really an industry of its own, but how do we get our companies and our municipalities and our dialed into this on the opportunity side, and then how do we get some research capability around that? And finally, logistics. So this implies working with the port and the airport. The $250 million expansion of the port is iconic. It is symbolic of the type of infrastructure investments that need to be made with a really future long-term vision. So we need to build on that. We have underutilized infrastructure in this region that needs to be fully utilized. I think there's only 2 more slides. We're committed over the 3 years on a quarterly basis to monitoring and measuring ourselves against our objectives. And we're going to do that from 2 perspectives. First, measuring our activities and what are the results in terms of job creation, business startup, all the things that you're used to hearing, but also on a more macro level. How are we moving collectively gross domestic product? How are we moving labor force participation? How will we influence the employment or unemployment rate? How are we influencing gross domestic product within this region? And finally, you know, this is not going to happen overnight. Even if we get out of the gate and we start, you know, hitting some things out of the park, consumer confidence is going to take time to turn around. For whatever reason, the confidence of people living in this region is below the national average, and it's below the regional average of Atlantic Canada. And that's going to take time to turn that around. So, and we only have, you know, we have a part to play in that, but the city has a large part to play. The provincial government has a large part to play. Industry has a very large part to play. So our work plan, we're currently have developed the 3-year economic development plan. We're currently developing the work plan for the first year, 2019, and we have that in draft form now. That will be hopefully approved by the board early December, and then in January we'll be launching the economic development plan in more of a public way. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about funding. This is our current funding model. And I have to tell you, when I came to the region, this was an anomaly to me. And I'm the strange guy that had this turned into a pie chart because I wanted to understand it. be able to demonstrate. 29% of Enterprise St. John's operational funding comes from the 5 municipalities: St. John, Grand Bay, Westfield, Westminster, Rothsay, and St. Martin. 10% of it over the last 5 years, since 2014, has been coming from a private sector request, going and asking the private sector if they could invest in economic development. And a full 61%, about 1.5 million, come from 2 other levels of government, provincial and federal, but it's project specific. So if I was on St. John City Council or any council, I'd be looking at that and saying that's pretty good leverage. For our 29%, we're getting 71% coming from other sources. So that's a good news story. The downside of that is because 61% of it is so project oriented that it makes it hard for us to be an agile economic development corporation. It makes us hard to dedicate 4 people to workforce development, dedicate 3 people to entrepreneurship development, and it makes it difficult for us to take from one project and move funding and support over to these priority areas. So with that in mind, and quite frankly, this 10% coming from the private sector, while it was very well intended 4 years ago when there was a pressure for the municipalities to be involved in economic development because the provincial and federal government had backed away from core funding. I would say that it was premature and it was not well thought out. And that's not a criticism to those in the past. In other areas where I've done economic development, we have gone to the private sector and asked them to partner in success areas. Partner with us to help us market the region. Partner with us to help us attract labor force. Partner with us to bring in new investment that will support your industry. That's a very different message than asking the private sector to help us keep the lights on, to help us keep our core people employed, to help us, so certainly to no surprise to me, it's been difficult, and it takes a lot of time and focus and attention to sit with industry and ask them to invest that kind of money. So the commitment of the board and myself is to back off from that somewhat and approach industry when we have the right message, when we have the blessing of the 5 councils to fully integrate the economic development plan, and that we can approach them from a strategic perspective where they can see a return on their investment. And that's the only way that you're going to get private sector interested in the long term. And I think that, okay. So I do feel I need a bit of a caveat for this. The board, the staff, myself, fully understand the enormous pressures that the city are under. We understand that to come forward and ask for an increase in budget could almost be defamation. That being said, I've been in economic development for a long time. I came to this region knowing that it was under a lot of challenges. And I came to this region with the commitment to try to focus on the things that can change that reality. And to the mayor's point, there is no silver bullet. We have to be doing the 4 things: workforce development, marketing, entrepreneur development, and investment attraction. We have to be doing them all with a level of excellence. We have not had an increase in budget since 2014. And as a result of that, we've had to go and seek other forms of funding just to keep the lights on. So this ask is with the premise that we need the resources to be intentional about working with the city to grow your population, to increase your tax base, and to increase jobs in the region. We will increase the budget for external promotion. So that's going to be pretty easy, because to go from 0 to anything will be an improvement. But we will be doing that in a focused and concerted way with the city and other agencies. Some of those funds will support workforce development. Right now we are working with 30 companies that are under the biggest duress in terms of getting employees. And we're working with the city and the province and others, but we're leading that process. And as I say, it takes resources to do that. So we're looking at filling 360 jobs in 6 months that have gone vacant for more than 90 days. We will target some of those funds towards business investment and innovation. So I'm certainly prepared to answer questions, and quite frankly, I expect tough questions on this one. But if we're going to, there are many things on your budget line items that that's very difficult to get a return on. You know, you put curb and gutter in. It's critically important. You invest in services. Critical for the health and well-being of the region. There's only a few things on your budget where you can anticipate that they can bring you a return on your investment. And if economic development is done well and done properly, it will give you a return on your investment. So we don't ask it as an increase for the sake of an increase. We ask it as an investment in your future. So I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm just going to turn it to Phil for a little bit of context in terms of some of the work that's been for committee, some of the work that's been done over the last call it a month or so with Ron and his team, and then we'll go to questions or comments. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess since summer, this really was an initiative that Ron and his team approached the city for feedback in the initial stages of establishing the plan. So staff and members of council participated in that. And since September, we've kind of ramped up a little bit more in terms of defining and supporting in different ways, and a formal kind of stakeholder engagement of the initial draft plan was undertaken by ESJ. And Ron mentioned it earlier that the city's participation in that really focused around 4 really key areas that we wanted to ensure that the plan upheld. And it's very nice to hear that Ron's kind of underlined that in his presentation, because in the investments that the city make towards economic development, these are key themes that we see across all economic development agencies and all work related to growth. So one is alignment, making sure that there is alignment amongst different strategies around the different areas. That any plan should enhance the level of collaboration and take advantage of those opportunities to build synergies between different groups that are working in this area. Another one is, and something that this committee certainly asks of anybody that sits around this table, is return on investment. It has to be clear. Very difficult. Some things are easier than others, obviously. As the mayor mentioned earlier on, economic development is not, unfortunately, black and white all the time. It's not the same thing as somebody coming in and saying, no, I paved a kilometer of highway. Here it is. Here's a picture of it. You can see it. You can touch it. Economic development sometimes doesn't have those same level of tangibility when it comes to matrix. But it doesn't mean we can't try. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try. So that's important. And then lastly is clear focus. We obviously have a lot of different actors in this area of economic development, not just at the municipal level, at the provincial level, and the federal level, and sometimes nonprofits are involved, and sometimes even companies, private sector companies are involved. So absolutely, in that arena, duplication can happen. Sometimes folks can try to take on some activities of others, And that's why focus is really important, making sure that you have a tangible piece of work and that you can go and tackle it. So staff, what they did was we established some, I wouldn't say they were easy questions for you, Ron. We wanted them to be provocative, and we wanted to see how you responded in those key themes. And we also had some initial feedback. So we went through that. And from staff's perspective, we really feel like the plan will bring a refreshed contribution to economic development in St. John. Thoughtful. The feedback we provided, although it hasn't been attributed back into the plan yet, everything that we brought up from Enterprise St. John's standpoint indicated we will update our plan to accommodate and integrate your feedback. So that's very strong. We also indicated the importance of those tangible outcomes, and also reiterating this logic that's happened out of the Roadmap for Smart Growth, that for the city to succeed in economic development, we need movement in those three areas. I don't know, we hammer this across every meeting, but it's because that's the outcome we're looking for. How many meetings Ron has in a year? Probably not the interest of this committee. We don't need to know how many meetings Ron has. What we need to know is employment growth. How you get there? Good luck. You can share that with us. You can explain that to us. That's what we'd like to know. But what we need to get back from this committee standpoint is how we're going to establish those growth outcomes. And that's what I think that policy level of this committee would want. So that's certainly indicative of the feedback was provided. The other thing I wanted to mention is that was really evident through this process, and especially the last 2 months, was the commitment of the ESJ staff on this plan, as well as the board. Sometimes it's a sell job for the board itself, and you can see that in agencies sometimes, that the staff are trying to sell the board, or sometimes the board is selling the staff. I think you have really great alignment between staff and the board. And ESJ has a unique perspective as well. There isn't many voluntary-based regional collaborations, especially financial ones in this area. And ESJ has one of them. And it's not always easy to do that, especially in an environment where we're crunching budgets, we're tightening the belt. But ESJ is committed to maintaining that regional cooperation, which they should also be congratulated for, as much as it is difficult to do. So the document that staff assembled is basically a review of those questions that we posed to ESJ, as well as some feedback. I'm not going to go through each one of those items. Certainly happy to ask, but some of the questions that we expected council to ask ESJ are on there. We framed them in that way to say, if I was a councillor, what questions would I ask? And they should be there. We might have missed some, but we tried our best. So that's it from my end. I think the mayor has a couple comments to make as well.
Okay, thank you. Questions? Yep, Councilor Blake. Councilor Armstrong, sir.
On the KPIs and outcomes, this has been brought up for 3 times now. You have potential entrepreneurs, 800, few results. I'd like to know the details. You have 25 startups, 24 startups. Well, who are they? 45 jobs, 48 jobs for existing. It doesn't tell me anything. That tells me nothing. If a guy says, why are you giving $500,000 to the ESJ? Well, they created 400 jobs. Well, where at, Blake? I don't know. I mean, that wouldn't pass the sniff test in a course at school by handing numbers in. So that's what where's the details? You know what I mean? So if you want us to defend giving 500 grand, in my eyes, well, we created 1,000 jobs, and I want to know where. So I can say, look, they've earned their right. They created these jobs here, there, and everywhere. A piece of paper saying 500 jobs doesn't mean anything to me. Correct? So that's what I'd look for, more detail in this. Please and thank you.
And thank you for the comment. We worked with the Regional Oversight Committee, which is made up of the 5 mayors. And again, I preface this by saying this was before my time, but I do think that it would not have been prudent for me to come in and discount that and start presenting other ways. That being said, this is the form that was agreed on. So
I asked so.
somewhat anticipating the question, let's talk about potential entrepreneurs. We're talking about how do we fill the pipeline for future growth. So what you would see there would be the names of students, college, university, high school students, this is a longer term investment. What I can tell you is this is fully paid by the federal government, so the municipality doesn't contribute this part of what we do, because I think it would be difficult for the city to to be too heavily invested in time that we spend in high schools. That being said, many of those students go on to go through our training programs and do start a business. In terms of startups, I'll give you a couple of examples. Companies like Bunkhouse here in Uptown St. John. What's very pleasing for me when I walk up King Street is to be able to identify the number of companies that got started out of our programming and continue to look to our economic development folks for mentoring and support as they go into or funding. We have in excess almost $1 million out in small loans for startup businesses in the region, and then they can come back. This is an independent committee that we have that puts these funds out, and the funding is provided by ACOA, by the way. So companies can get up to $20,000 to start their business, and then another 20 to expand and increase what they do.
So, Ron, I think the thing that
that's not. Excuse me. That's not answering my question. I'm a counselor. I'm accountable to the people that elect me, and they say, Blake, you gave $500,000 to Enterprise St. John. You showed me. Well, that's what they do. And the first question out of a half-intelligent person's mouth is, well, they created 884 jobs. Where at, Blake? Well, I don't know. It just says they created 800. Well, prove it to me, Blake. That's all I'm saying. I'm not talking about if you're doing good work, bad work. I'm talking about results, which any normal person would ask. When you gotta fill out the loan to get money from your place, I'm sure you want all the information, correct? Well, that's all I'm saying. I'd like to have more detailed information to defend why I'm voting for it to give you $500,000 or $67,000 more dollars. Here, I can't defend that because there's nothing to defend but a piece of paper saying I created 1,000 jobs. If I come to you asking for a loan, I need $1 million. I know I can create 1,000 jobs. I don't think you're going to give me the $1 million, eh? I wouldn't think so. So that's all I'm saying. It's just, I know I talk a little bit blunt, but I'm saying information. This is not information. This is a piece of paper saying we did this, but there's no facts or reason from it. That's all I'm saying. So I look for more in depth.
So I wasn't trying to not acknowledge. So I this issue that the councillor's bringing up, he wouldn't be alone on whether it be Quispam, Rossi, or whatever. I think it's a topic that we should bring back to the currently established oversight model to say, okay, folks, how do we tell this story differently without having, because I don't want this one person doesn't want you spending your time or stuff on that every day of the week trying to sort of spell out in detail every piece, but it is something that the councilor's bringing up that many other councilors would have the same types of questions. So how do we take that feedback and say, okay, X number of times per year, we're going to articulate out what has been done and try to tell it differently, because I think the way we're doing it, which is currently pretty high level with a high level of trust, in some cases is not. It's how do I say? It's not passing the sniff test on the street, and then so that is an issue with the council bringing up. Agree, and how do we take it back and try to bring something back that satisfies that concern? Not going to probably be able to satisfy it today, Councillor Armstrong, but to acknowledge it and say we'll take it back. Deputy Mayor.
Well, I have a couple of questions. Ron, first of all, thank you for what you do in the board. And I know it's difficult, and we go through this so many times. But just a quick question on this part. 67,995. Is that St. John's share or is that the whole share?
No, that would be the ask of St. John. So each municipality on a representation by population has been.
So I would like sometime to see the breakdown. I want to know what the other municipalities are going to be asked for too, or we expect to give, just because I want to know. I think it should be broken out. Now, the way I looked at your presentation, your number one goal, and I don't disagree, but I just want to talk about it for a minute, is that you're going to try to fill jobs of present companies that are here now where they want employees, they just can't find that right work skills. And like you said, I want to go into this a little bit, if you don't mind. Supposing I owned a huge manufacturing company in the city, and I did paint presses, for instance, and I couldn't find, I advertised, I couldn't find, I bought a new machine, I couldn't find people to operate the machine. So I would assume I'd advertise far and wide, see if I could. So how are you going to do that? Like, I own the company, it's in my best interest to find out if I can get somebody to fill those jobs, because I need it. But first of all, I wouldn't buy the machine unless I knew I could fill the job. So how are you going to do that? And you're not understanding that. You're taking public money to try to find employees to fit these jobs. And what it will do for the community, these people will come in and they'll live here because they're going to have a job here. And they might live here, they might live anywhere in the region, but and it'll make those companies more successful. But how are you going to do that? You're actually going out looking for individuals.
It's a great question. So I'll let one to
I did
to
kick him
speak,
under the
and
table.
then
Yeah, I thought.
and then I
Yeah,
will,
I did you want-
and then I'm happy to speak to
He
it.
So-
flinched a little bit too far.
It's my style, right? Okay.
So,
I'm really glad you asked that question because it's a fabulous question, and I actually am going to answer it not from a board member's perspective. I'm going to answer from a business perspective. In the presentation, ESJ noted that there are 30 companies that are going to be identified for this particular project. And what I would say over the last 10 years is, and Ron is right, when he went out to ask what keeps you up at night, it really was a needs-based analysis. What does this community need? And every sector, every employer, and I was on some of those meetings, it is workforce. Some people are actually thinking about downsizing. Maybe they actually can't sustain their business. It is part of the strategy is retention of businesses, that we are at a risk that if we can't figure this out, A, we're not going to get the expansions, or B, people are saying this workforce is really difficult, so maybe we're actually going to lose business from it. So from the hotel's perspective, hotels have really grown in the last probably 5 years. We've seen a big spike, kind of a rebound. That's great in so many ways. But what really has crunched us is we're really struggling with workforce development in hotels and in tourism and restaurants. I'm sure you open the paper anywhere you go, it's just everywhere. We need employees. So we volunteered to say, yeah, we would love to be one of those 30 companies, not just as a hotel, but as an industry. And part of it is ESJ, and a lot of people don't know this, but they have a ton of partnerships. You know, from our perspective in the hotel, we work with the Y, we work with the Learning Exchange, and we've been really creative how to find our employees. But there are a lot of people that just don't know. They actually don't have HR managers. You know, yet they do the traditional advertising, but they just don't have all the resources to bring the collaboration together. So I look at ESJ and I really commend them, along with Petal and the province, to say we have to do this differently because there are a lot of employers in our regions that actually don't have the resources or the expertise to do this. So I think part of putting this out there, it is actually a real asset. And I actually think the private sector money, because that was one of the number one things they talked about was the workforce development, is they actually look at ESJ and compliment them for their leadership on this file. Because there's no one group bringing these collaborative groups together. We've got a lot of people that are living in poverty that are trying to find a hand up, an entry point into the workplace, but they just can't make the connections. A lot of these groups do this. So I think ESJ is just showing leadership. How do we bring them all together and help the employers, help workforce development, but also help those who actually are having a hard time finding a job? And then how do you do that, even bringing immigration and people from outside, to bring it all under one group? So I look at this piece, and There is one organization that needs to own it in our region, whereas I think we have provincial representation, we have nonprofit, but they're a bit scattered. So I look at this as a real opportunity, and that's just basically from a business perspective.
So Enterprise St. John would own that part.
We do, and we've been asked by so Petal, ONB, the city, the executive council, the premier's office. As you know, there is a focus on the city's priorities in terms of population, tax, and job creation. We have, I would say, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to create a best-in-class here. And that's why. So all of those groups have identified the single biggest current issue is this job gap. Now, I just spent the last 5 days in Southern Ontario. And before that, I spent 10 years in Southern Ontario. What I can tell you is that this is not unique to St. John. It's a new reality. It's a new reality from the world of economic development. For years, we've been trying to bring in new investment, right? And then we thought the new investment, the jobs would follow it. Today, in 5 short years, it's done an about face. And today, the investment will follow the labor force. We are being, and I don't want to go down some road of scare tactics, so I want to focus on the benefit side of this. We have senior levels of government that are working with us to move policy if it needs to be moved, move programs if it needs to be moved, be intentional with these 30 companies, develop a pilot that can be emulated in other places if we can find that formula. So, you know, I've been reaching out, and others have, to these 30 companies to get their commitment, because we need their, you know, they need to.
And I understand that, but a lot of your success in this will be your network, right?
Yep.
Wages, whatever it may be. Okay, I kind of got that now, but
so we will do job fairs. We will do whatever it takes to try to fill these job gaps.
But I do need to say something else, and it goes to our staff. You know, 2 years ago, when we started the growth committee, maybe a little longer than that, a little bit earlier, we all sat around this table and we talked about how we have so many agencies. How can they work better together? How can they save money on, you know, inside working or whatever? You know, how can we bring them closer together? And I have to keep that in mind, because, like, I'm not sure we got closer together. We might have, but I don't know, because we've got bigger in other ways. We've got more agencies. We've got Develop St. John. We've got Enterprise St. John. We've got Discover St. John. And basically, none of you do exactly the same thing. But you do part of the same thing. You're trying to increase population. Now we have a population growth manager. We have so much, and everybody needs more money. So I guess we have to keep all that in mind. I mean, everybody's asking for more money. They need another staff person to do this. They need something else to do something else. So at the end of the day, it all comes back to municipalities. We have the money in the budget fund. And that's how we all started out, trying to get everybody together. So 1 hour to get out there. We're bigger now. I don't know. What. Are we succeeding? That's a question. I guess we all have to ask ourselves. Because, you know, you're trying to do things, Develop St. John, Discover St. John. I mean, we're all looking for trying to bring more people.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I can only imagine what it looks like to, you know, externally, or how it plays out in the media, or how it plays out with councillors. The reality is we're not tripping over each other. We're very focused on 4 areas. Those are areas that we do. In some cases, we will be the lead agency. In others, we will be the support agency. But it's incumbent upon us to work together and to be strategic and to move those respective.
And I understand all that. It's just how much money we have to give to all.
We're going to keep moving. I think it's going to play out beautifully in the media today, Ron. I have a good sense because we have an excellent reporter in the room. So no pressure about it. Councilor McKenzie, please.
Thank you. Ron, Paula, thank you very much for coming in, and I think it's a great report. I got a couple of questions, and one of them is regarding your KPI. Where did these targets arrive from? Is this a scientific formula that you used, or where did you draw these numbers from?
So, what I can tell you is that we inherited these. They were discussed at ROC, and I think with very good intention, because I think the conversation, well, what are we spending our money on? And it was, well, if council understood, what you were doing with potential entrepreneurs and startups and existing, and this was the metrics that was determined. We need to, and I'm happy to provide whatever metrics you want, and I'm, to the extent we can, I'm happy to share the names. I can tell you in terms of external investments that was Air Canada and TD and Vicom. I can name these companies, and we're happy to do that. What we need to do as a region, and we had to do this in Moncton, we had to do this in Windsor, Essex, and we had to do this in Kitchener-Waterloo. We have to have a growth mentality, and we have to be positive about who we are and what we have to showcase to the world. If we don't believe that intuitively about ourselves, it's impossible to go out and convince others that we're a good place to live. I can give you numbers until the cows come home, and I'm happy to do that. And some counselors are going to be motivated by the numbers. Others are not going to be motivated by them. They're going to be motivated by the fact they know people that are hiring. They know people that are coming up to them and saying, I'm so glad that good things are happening in St. John. I'm glad I hear that people are moving in. We're getting more positive comments. Our consumer confidence index is changing. That the tax base is increasing, and that takes effort and it takes time. And we're happy to provide whatever numbers and metrics you would like. What I won't do under my watch is spend an inordinate amount of time doing that and not doing what we need to be doing.
Sure, and the other part of that answer, John, sorry to interrupt, is how did we arrive here? As you know, we made some changes to our approach with Enterprise St. John. We had some great discussion, deliberations at times. We ended up with a new approach mandate letter. So the ROC, which is represented by the 5 regional mayors, debated these metrics. So I think we were better a year ago than we were a year before that, and we have a great opportunity to be better a year from now than we are today. So we did arrive here. It wasn't just Ron or Steve as his predecessor decided to throw these on the table. We, the 5 regional mayors, had a great debate with the board at the time to say what are those bucket and areas we should focus in and what numbers are reasonable. And both Ron and Steve and staff and board before Ron said, look, we also can make these numbers be whatever we want. And we can go run around claim everybody's jobs in town. But these were meant to be a fair and reasonable representation of what they thought they could get done. So that's the quick, from a ROC perspective, that's how we arrived there as well.
Yeah, and I'm not knocking anybody here.
No.
All right, I'm simply saying, for example, if you had somebody in charge of potential entrepreneurs, startups, existing businesses, etc., and you went to that person and said, what do you think is a fair target? And I was doing potential entrepreneurs, and I said, I think 800 to spare. And then at the end of Q3, you got 1,525. You'd be looking at me saying, I'm not sure about you. We almost doubled what you said we should do. Whereas on the other hand, you get a startup at 25. I say 25 startups, and we get 24. Now that guy knows what he's talking about, right? You see what I'm getting at? It's like building a house. If somebody says, I'll do the house for 800,000 and they come in at 2 million, you're saying, so that's the only reason I asked. If there's no real scientific thing, if it's based on experience or history or whatever, that's fine, that's cool.
So what I can tell, and I don't want to belabor the fact, but we're happy to supply all the information to this. In terms of potential entrepreneurs, that's a program that's funded by a co-op. And it's a portion of one staff's time that's going into the high schools throughout the region in the city and interacting with students from the standpoint of introducing them to the concept of owning and operating a business. What happened in this case is the province fell in love with the program and they wanted to emulate it, and they used this as the basis. So they were encouraging others to come in and view it and to get involved.
And that inflates the number.
That inflates the number, yeah. So the person, it's not that, there was no way that she could predict that the province was going to say, we want every kid in the province going through this.
Fair
and
enough.
she can't do that.
Fair enough.
Right?
I'm good. All right. The other question that I have for you.
Yes,
Okay. It goes with the current funding model.
Yeah.
Okay. So 61% is program targeted through the provincial and federal government, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Who targets the money? Is it the federal government, provincial government says, I want this money to go to this or that? Or is it you that says, this is our priority, we want the money to go to this?
Yeah, so it's both. I would tell you that all of the effort in entrepreneurship development now comes from other levels of government. Yet we're having a lot of impact on that. As I say, you go up King Street and the number of businesses on King Street that come out of our programming, it really is a sense of pride for the organization, and I would hope for the city. There are other projects. So ACOA has a mandate to encourage entrepreneurship. We are the delivery mechanism for that. In other cases, we go to them with identified priorities. And what we have asked them is if we could, under our 4 bucket areas of plan going forward, can we sit with them to develop a more robust, agile approach so that we can do what needs to happen at the regional level, at the civic level, to have impact on workforce development, innovation and business retention, marketing, and entrepreneurship. So we're trying to leverage the municipal funding so that all of the funding is focused on those 4 pillars and only those 4 pillars. Because we've been criticized for being too wide and too thin, and we're trying to rein that in and be really focused. Municipally, federally, and provincially, wherever the dollars come from, and privately, they're focused on those 4 areas to drive the outcomes that the city is looking for: tax base, population, and jobs.
Well, I will say I really like where you're going. I think you guys are doing a really good job. Okay. You have to ask the questions because they're obvious questions to ask. Right?
Absolutely.
But I certainly appreciate what you're doing. I think that you're moving in the right direction. And see where it goes.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor.
I want to go to your ask. You said you're asking for an additional increase in your funding for marketing budget for external promotion of the Greater St. John story. Who are you not able to market it to now because you don't have that extra money?
To me, the single biggest void when I started my career here, I left, I come back. The region is smaller than it was. There's less jobs than it is. The population has aged. The young people are moving out, and I with all due respect, I'm shaking my head. I'm saying, what the heck are people doing about this? Where is the sense of crisis, folks? You need to be marketing. You need to spend some resources on marketing, and you will not get a return on that if you don't spend it. Now, there is no guarantee that if you spend it, that I can come before you and say, in 3 months, here's the outcome of that. But we have committed quarterly to report on those 4 pillars and what we're doing and what kind of result we had. We're committed to working with the city, with Steve and his group, and with Discover, with the port, with the airport, but with full conviction. Literally, with full conviction, we want to change the reality of this region. It should, honestly, to be the only CMA in Canada to have lost population in the last census, to me, not only should be an Atlantic Canadian crisis, it should be a Canadian crisis. And we should be able to pull in other levels of government to work with us collectively to make this a priority. This can't happen. Urban, medium and small urban Canada cannot start disappearing at the expense of the GTA, Montreal, Vancouver, Kitchener, Waterloo. We're a country that was built on a promise of prosperity for all. We need to get intentional with this. So $68,000 and a percentage of that to go on marketing is not going to do what you need it to do. Steve needs money. The city needs money. We need money. We need the province and the new government to be convicted to turning this reality around, because we project the demographics out over the next 20 years. It's not pretty. And I can only imagine what it's like to be on council and trying to deal with that fiscal challenge. That being said, we're 20 years behind Moncton in terms of marketing. We're 3 years behind them in terms of their focused effort to attract immigration and workforce.
Why do you think that is?
What?
Tell us why. What's not being done right?
I'm going to be honest.
Absolutely, because we recognize it's a crisis. Absolutely.
When I took on the role of president CEO in Moncton, this was a city that had a 40-year out-migration of people. It had 15% unemployment rate. It had 700,000 square feet of vacant office space in downtown alone. It had vacant industrial buildings in the industrial park. In that time, I was a young new CEO that was probably totally naive, but I said we can become the business center of Atlantic Canada, but we got to put a stake in the ground and become that. The difference, and I'm just being completely authentic here, the difference is that at that time, Greater Moncton identified a crisis. And I think in Greater St. John in particular, it's been a slower drip. It's been, our population is getting older, our young people are moving away. We've had a harder time transitioning from what would be called the old economy to the new economy. Moncton has, for every job Moncton lost in the last 25 years, they've replaced it with 3.1 jobs. For every job we lost in the old economy, we've replaced it by 1. So, it's not going backwards, but Halifax has outpaced us to 2.7 to 1. Fredericton, 2.8 to 1. Moncton, 3.1 to 1. They have transitioned from the old economy to the new economy quicker than we have. Now, we have a proud history of making things and shipping things, and I think we need to hold on to that. We need to build on that. But we also need to build on the new economy. And we need to be better at telling people that we're a different community than we were 30 years ago. So, unfortunately, if we had $500,000 to spend on marketing, we collectively, I would say, let's spend the first 50% for the first year and a half internally, trying to convince ourselves that we have something to sell to an outside community. And then market. We need a regional campaign, we need a national campaign, we need a local campaign, and we need a small international campaign. And we need to work with other levels of government to leverage that. But
So would you,
The time to start was 5 years ago. So if I sound desperate, it's because I'm a tad frustrated that this hasn't been dealt with before now.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, we're going to table an item just so we can try to get back on track. A couple of comments, then I'm going to say for our city manager, thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Ray. So great dialogue today. Thank you for the presentation. A couple of quick comments for me. I think just on that last piece that you asked about, and I think others touched on. I mean, we're gonna have soon that broader conversation as well. And I don't disagree with Ron. We're equally passionate as is all the other agencies in the room on how do we bundle ourselves up and package ourselves. And because what I witness here is we've got a group of folks that absolutely get it. They're most amazing ambassadors. They think this is the best city in North America to live in. It's affordable. It's beautiful. Where people are generous and kind. They have a flourishing job. And in the same day, I can walk down the street and somebody will chastise me to Tim Hortons and say, there's nothing here, there are no jobs. And so I think everyone agrees we have some work to do. How does it fit into the broader and the bigger picture of the city corporation and those agencies? And frankly, Ron knows, it's the complication as well of the city of St. John and the greater region of St. John. It's complicated. And I won't go down that lane, but that's complicated too. So I think some rapid fire for me, and then I'll turn it over to Neil. One is, I think the labor force data, I think there's still voids. I know you're putting a great document out. I don't recall if it's quarterly or monthly. I don't remember, Ron, but that's great. But I still think that, here's my view. We know that the predictions are we need 150,000 people in New Brunswick over the next 15 to 20 years just to sustain the economy, which means we need to be bringing in about 7,000 people a year, and I think we're bringing in 2,500 to 3,000, 4,000. We need to ramp that up. We know we have a huge talent problem, and I think it was there, but it's just gotten to a point now where we can keep announcing all we want. If we keep announcing we don't fill these jobs, we're gonna shoot ourselves right in the foot. So talent has quickly become the absolute thing that we must master in terms of filling these jobs, whether it be TD, IBM. So we had a job fair, Enterprise and all of the other agencies that were involved, OMB and others, Petal, had a job fair the other day. And there were, I understand, over 500 jobs available with over 40 employers. Downey Ford was there, folks. Downey Ford was at a job fair. When is the last time you heard of a car dealer? And Sheila, not Sheila, one of the real, I think, Sherry Cedric, I think he's the president of New Brunswick Real Estate, or St. John Real Estate Board, said, oh gosh, Don, can we go to that next time? So we're in a spot now. I did a little video from down there, and I said, folks, I don't want to hear anymore there's no jobs. There's tons of jobs in St. John, but there is a mismatch. And I got a few people sort of pushed me back on my video. I'm not trying to be demeaning, but they were unhappy that I had said I don't want to hear anymore from people that don't. So it's complex. There's people that cannot, for some reason, find a job, but yet we have employers that are saying, So I think we need that labor data so that we can, short term, go likely get people all over the world, interprovincially, and retrain people. But we must also better inform. What a shame, any high school graduate that's going to graduate this year that isn't taking training that is going to be in one of those sectors where there's going to be almost instantaneous jobs. And we've got a tale of two scenarios happening here. Can't find a job, but I'm all skilled in a certain sector, and I got a job in 5 minutes, and I had 3 job offers. So it's getting really complex, and that's why we need to get it as right as we can. Move, revisit it, and get it better. I almost said righter. Right. Get it righter again, and move again, and that's my view. So it would have been in the past jobs, and now it's people. I talked about. We don't need to settle it today, but I'm asking Ron, you, city manager, Phil, Jackie, Paulette, how do we benchmark? How are we doing? I need to benchmark. I need to see how we're doing. And I know we all work in glass houses here, right? I get contacted on a daily basis by folks who finally, for example, on Friday night online, I sent folks all of our financial information and I asked them for their growth plans, their cost restructuring plans, because they know how to do it way better than any of us spending 50 hours a week talking about it. That's part of, and I think we should listen to that. We should be able to articulate what we're doing, but I'm going to listen to the subject matter experts too. But that benchmarking piece is really important. I think we need, trying to get icon, and Phil, I think we need a citywide snapshot, economic snapshot, not to shoot at people, not to throw arrows at people, just to say, where are we on total number employed? Where are we on GDP? We've talked about this. I think we need to land that one. And then collectively, we're all contributing to that. I don't care if TD Insurance made the announcement themselves or you were involved in it for 9 months. I care about us landing that and landing the jobs. I think we're in a great, almost done. I think we're in a great position. We have the Minister of PEDAL, Post-Education Training and Labor, Trevor Holder. We have the Minister of Social Development, Dorothy Shepherd. We have MLA Jerry Lowe. We have MLA Glenn Savoy. We have a Premier from Greater St. John. We're lined up to do some great things, and because of the crisis/opportunity and the fact that this council's had the guts to own the situation we're in, I think we've never been more poised for success than we are right now, in my humble opinion. So lots of other stuff, but I'll probably stop there. Neil, do you have?
If I may, on the benchmarking, the one thing this plan commits to is reporting on the metrics on a quarterly basis, and then on the activity metrics. So that's, jobs and who we've been working with, and certainly to your point, Aaron, it's a valid one. Whatever detail you want around that, we're happy to provide. Beyond that, we're going to be looking at those macro issues. One thing I would like to see happen is that we have, once a year, not ESJ, but with the city, with the population, folks with developed, discovered, that we have an event that talks about, in a very real way, that benchmark. How have we moved? And we can be honest about where we're down, and we can be honest about where we're up, but at least we're tracking it as a community. And I don't think that message belongs to ESJ. I think it's something we should do collectively, and we all have skin in the game, and we all report on the metrics.
Okay, thank you. Neil, wrap us up.
Really few quick observations, comments. First of all, I just want to thank ESJ team, staff, and board. I know there's an incredible legacy of board members of ESJ who put in a lot of time and commitment to the community in the Greater St. John region, and also just in terms of the issue came up around collaboration, and I will say I think there's an increasing level of collaboration with ESJ, and you have a phenomenal team, Ron. I don't have to tell you that, and they're extraordinarily dedicated to the community. And from Eleanor helping us out with communications issues, to the work on the smart cities, to the work we're doing right now with the province and rolling up our sleeves around filling those vacant positions. It's a very genuine level of collaboration. And I know over the last couple of months we've challenged each other, I guess, with regards to your vision and the strategic plan, which I think is really well founded and grounded, and I think we really need that focus, alignment, and that collaboration going forward, and the focus on return on investment, which is a big thing that we talked about here today. One thing I have to come back to, I know it's been referenced a few times, and I spent 13 years at Enterprise St. John, but the historic model was people follow jobs. If we go out, we attract companies, and I remember one year when we attracted a whole lot of call centers and back office operations, the assumption was that people will come. But even blow that up now, it's the other way around. Investment in companies now follow the people. So we realize that. I think the city's stepped up and put up our hand quite aggressively over the last year and a half through the leadership of the growth and community development team around focusing on growth and population growth, and David's role and how we work with the province on the population attraction side. But we have to collectively address the job gap, and it's a matter of survival. It's absolutely critical in terms of urgency. And my last comment is one that involves city accountability. I know there's been a lot of discussions around marketing and communications. But we need a collaborative approach, and I know we're having that discussion around how we shape that model in terms of communicating with growth with one voice and telling the St. John story and focusing internally, as you referenced, but also externally. And that's absolutely going to be critical. And quite frankly, I do think we have a pretty amazing story to tell in terms of quality of life and quality of employers and quality of opportunities in this community. And I think it's a testament to the people in this room as well when you look at that. So I guess my closing remarks are I think this is an important step forward and look forward to working with the ESJ in terms of next steps on the implementation side.
Thank you.
Can I just say one more thing? I think you brought up the best point of all. We're behind 25, 30 years, and it's all marketing. And I believe we had this conversation with our former city manager. He started a plan, and you're right, we don't start marketing. And I'm talking about the whole city, because that's what it is. It's marketing. It's perception. It doesn't mean truth, but it's perception. And I'll agree with you 100%. And if there's businesses going up King Street, all you have to do is say, Blake, we started that, and that. In on it. That's simple.
Thank you. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks very much, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so my proposal here, and then we'll I know folks are tight at the other end, so we're going to table the work plan strategy session, so we'll just deal with the Heritage Board referral that we had from council the last, and I think Ms. Poffenroth's going to deal with that for us.
We don't make a.
That's closed, eh?
What's that? No. Sorry. Our next open item is 1.2 Heritage Grant Budget Request from Heritage Development Board. Okay.
Thank you. So the Heritage Development Board submitted a report, a letter into council, which has been now referred to the Growth Committee. And the Heritage Development Board is looking for an increase in the Heritage Grant funding to $200,000. In the 2019 proposed draft budget, in the operating budget, we have $80,000 right now in for Heritage grants. And so the board is asking for an increase basically of $120,000 to a total of $200,000. What the board intends to do with that, among other things, is modify the projects that would be eligible for grant funding, particularly more modern materials for windows, which is a major, number of projects every year that can't draw on the grant funding right now, but they would like it to be an incentive in the future. So that's sort of part of their explanation as to why they'd like an increase. So the Common Council has referred it to Growth Committee, and now Growth Committee actually has to make a recommendation to Finance Committee. And what staff is recommending is that the operating budget remain at $80,000, but that any increases to the Heritage Grant funding would be a draw on the growth reserve. But before the Growth Committee decides on that, waits until we hear a report from staff, which is coming out of the next meeting of December or January, where we talk about the Development Incentives Program, the pilot, and how we may move forward with that, and a discussion about possible expenditures or draws from the growth reserve coming, that we can bring you more information about the Heritage Grant policy and the program, so that you can make a better informed decision.
So let me just understand. So the recommendation is to sort of hold for now,
Yes.
but also see how it fits into a broader discussion about development incentives.
That's right.
And okay.
Right, and we'll be able to bring back some information about the Heritage Grant at that time,
Okay.
as part of that
So
discussion.
we would hold and table this until such time that we've.
Right, you'd recommend to Finance to hold the draft operating at $80,000 and consider an additional in the next month or two.
At a later date.
Well, I have no problem with that, but are you saying that you're going to bring a report at some point in time, or a recommendation to this committee on incentives?
Yes, that's
Yes.
right.
And,
The next
those incentives, like the growth committee in the past has had a budget of up to $350,000. Those incentives, you're not saying it's coming out of that $350,000.
We're saying the potential, there is the potential to draw down from the growth reserve if growth committee and council agrees that this is a priority, that there's the potential
For the heritage thing.
for the heritage, that's right.
But for the other part of it, the incentives for development that we haven't got yet.
Yep.
Is that money separate or is that in the 350,000?
Yeah, it's a separate budget line in growth and community
Is it in the
development
budget
services.
now?
And it is funded at the same level, it is proposed to be funded at the same level that it's been funded in 2018. So 220,000 is currently allocated in the
So is that
operating
in the
budget.
draft 2019
Yes, it is.
budget?
So it's in addition to the 350 allocated for the growth
Right,
reserve.
okay. Now, this additional money is not in the draft 2019 budget.
No.
And if we did this, it would have to come out of our 350,000.
That's right.
So we'll make a decision on that, I guess, later time. So we'll table it.
So the recommendation is that we send the recommendation to finance to hold at the current funding, and that we will come back to this committee in whenever, within 60 days, a couple months or so, subject to timing, and have a more wholesome discussion about development incentives as a whole, and then we can see where we go from there.
I'll second.
Discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Contrary-minded? Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we'll take, adjourn. So we're going to table that last item, and we'll adjourn for just a couple of minutes and grab some food, and then I recommend we get right back into our closed working session. Let's grab some food. Okay, motion to adjourn, please. Second, all those in favor? Contrary-minded? Okay. Thank you.
I don't think that.
Yeah, I thought it was 11:30. I was here. I was up by 8. Yeah, I was in the building at 11:45.